Tony Khan got beat up by the Elite. It was a pretty big deal. It was the talk of the town. He went on the NFL draft selling his neck with the neck brace. It was I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but I wanna hear your thoughts on it as throughout Dynamite last week, they played up that there's gonna be a big confrontation between Jack Perry and Tony Khan in the ring, and that led to Jack Perry punching him in the gut, and eventually the Elite giving him a TK driver, formerly the Meltzer driver.
Right.
What'd you think of the angle?
I got to tell you, I would love to hear your thoughts first.
Oh, you wanna hear
Please.
my
Yeah,
thoughts first?
please. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay. I thought number 1, I'll say this, I thought it was extremely entertaining. I thought it was very entertaining. I thought it was great how over the course of the show, they laid the seeds for it. I always I've talked about this in the past with you. Whenever you have an A story to follow throughout the course of a show, I always think it makes for a more cohesive show. And that was an angle that they followed throughout the night and paid off in the main event. So
Mhm.
I'm always about that. Jack Perry's really good at this character. It's going to get over pretty big. I feel pretty confident in that.
It's gonna be huge.
And I think that he's leaning into all the right elements. I absolutely think that that little smirk is an allusion to the Punk GIF, the famous Punk GIF, you know, where Punk does the little smirk into the camera. I totally think it's playing off that. It's good stuff. I thought the Elite were fantastic in this segment. They're really, really good at slowly unraveling the layers of the onion. And like when you thought that the Elite were going, or the Bucks rather, were going to hit him with the EVP trigger, and then Okada's like, "No, let's get him up," and then eventually that leads to the TK. I thought that was all really well done. You know, I'll say this about Tony and his selling, which a lot of people were very critical of. Regardless of what you think about how he sold in that moment, that was probably the greatest moment in Tony Khan's life. I think Tony Khan has waited all 40 years of his life for that moment to have a chance to be part of that wrestling angle. And for Shad Khan to come out at the end, by the way, Shad Khan, undoubtedly, I did the math, undoubtedly the richest man who's ever appeared on a pro wrestling television show. Um, it was definitely something that I will say, no matter what, Matt, you couldn't look away. And they at least paid off putting the TV footage, the hidden cam footage on TV. At least they made sense of that. What would you say?
I agree with all that. It did help make sense of using the footage. It bettered that argument, I think, of using the footage because just kind of in its own. And one thing my wife said, she wished there had been commentary over it, as opposed to just kind of like quiet, still footage, and they could have almost like described it more, which could have put it more in the in the Jack Perry narrative. Make actually take his side of the argument. They
If
could
the
have done
Bucks
that
talked about him being a
extemporaneously.
victim in the moment.
Of course, yeah, and put that over the video, and I agree with that. And that was from my wife Rebecca, and she's pretty good at some of these things. Um, but the fact is, they did that. It's kind of been building, and whenever they did the deal where Jack hit him with the mic, and he dropped, and then the Bucks were like helping him up, and they just like kind of accidentally got into that position for like the EVP trigger. That was fantastic. And then the Okada thing, subtly, no, pick him up, and they did the thing, and they dropped Tony. People can complain about a selling. That's their right. They can. But do you remember the first stunner Vince McMahon ever took?
I said that every single time I saw someone talking about how bad Tony's selling was. I'm like,
And
does
and
anyone remember Vince's first stunner? Oh my
you know,
god, it was horrible.
and it's just, but it is what it is. And you know what? I'm okay with this because Tony Khan is not a fucking
No,
trained professional wrestler.
he's not.
It is what it is. And neither was Vince. Like if they did it and something it went awry, whatever, you get the intent behind it, you get the whole idea behind it. And I love the fact that Tony finally embraced that he was a critical part of the show. He's always said, like, no, I don't want to be a character. I want to be straightforward. I'm just here to promote wrestling. That's fine. Tony Khan is a character in the AEW universe. He cannot stop that. He cannot change that.
He made himself one. Indirectly, he made himself one.
But between his appearances on TV and his
Mhm.
announcements and his tweets more than anything else on social media, that has transitioned him. He is a character on the show, and people feel very strongly about him, either one way or the other. So there's no denying that he's a character on the show, and I'm glad he embraced it, and I'm glad he did this. And I honestly think this is one of the best angles that AEW's ever done. You look the next day, the NFL was talking about it. He got coverage, press all over about this specific angle as he was wearing the neck brace. And I think AEW needs more of that stuff. I love that. I love that. That is what is going to grow the brand. That is what is going to put more people in buildings. That is what is going to put more eyeballs on the product. So I'm a big advocate of that, and I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, and as far as the selling goes, again, my thoughts on this. I've talked about this at length, especially on our kayfabe episode. It's kayfabe dead. Check that out in the archives, extremehardy.com. We all know pro wrestling is fake. We know it's fake. So how well somebody sells, it's a very antiquated thing for me because we know what we're seeing is an illusion. So
Yeah,
Tony
and I,
Khan,
I wouldn't even say fake, John. I would say we know pro wrestling is entertainment.
yeah, well,
You know what I
sorry,
mean?
yes, I know I
Yeah,
used
you know
the
what I
F
mean?
word, but but you know what I mean,
And I mean, it's not bad, but it's also not accurate too. You know, when
right?
people say it's not accurate, it's truly not accurate. I mean, it is
Sure.
entertainment. People are working together, but people like get hurt you
No,
get hurt
no, of
all the
course.
time.
I know that firsthand. I would never downplay that element of it. But I mean, the fake. What I'm referring to is like we know that we're seeing a scripted fight here. So when someone is not a great seller, especially someone like Tony Khan, who's not a professional wrestler, I don't know. It doesn't take me out of it. Like, did I laugh? Yeah, I laughed. Was I supposed to laugh? I don't know if I was supposed to laugh, but it was entertaining and it had my attention the entire angle. I couldn't look away. When he came out, Matt, and he looked like Smiley McGee out there, I'm like, oh, dude, this guy's getting dropped today. I'm like, it is happening finally. And I think because he so badly insisted, I'm not going to be a character on the show. I'm not going to do any of that. There was almost a shock value of actually seeing him take a bump
Sure.
and that added to the layers of it. And now it seems like there's going to be some sort of an angle that's going to lead to a team AEW versus a team Tony Khan or a team authority figure, whoever that is. That seems to be the route it's going to be going here.
It does, and I like it. It's intriguing. This is another thing I can say. So my wife, most people who watch the show probably know who she is, Rebecca Hardy. She was Queen Rebecca when we were doing the whole Broken Matt saga, right? In TNA initially, but she big deal on social media, especially on TikTok, social media influencer. And like her attention span's very short. She's a New Yorker, she's Hispanic, she's from Puerto Rico, she's a Boricua. So she has the blood, and then also being from New York on top of that, she has a very short attention span. So a lot of times when she's doing these TikTok videos, she's anything over 10 seconds is too long. 10 seconds in and out, too long. She actually sat down and watched this. I said, you've got to watch this segment with what happens with Tony because he ends up mixing it up. And when she sat down and started watching the stuff, when he was in there with Jungle Boy, shook the hands and hit Tony, I'd never seen her be so compelled in pro wrestling television. My wife watching it, just as as Jack hit Tony, boom, and then the whole thing with the Bucks, how they slowly did that, and they start helping him up and doing this, and it looks like they're going to hit him, but then no, they don't, and then they end up doing it and drop. She sat there and she watched through that whole thing. She said, "That's the best segment I've ever seen on AEW television." She said, "That's the most compelling and interesting thing I've ever seen on AEW television." Now, I'll say this outright: she doesn't give a shit about wrestling. A 5-star match, she could care less. She won't watch a match for over 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And like she doesn't care. Good wrestling, I think she loves like the drama and the storyline behind it. If something is interesting, she is looking for an interesting scenario. And there are a lot of people like that. And once again, I actually chalk her up to probably the best example of a casual fan for me because I can have her watch something and she can say if it interests her or not.
Sure.
Because there's stuff that she watches that is like diehard wrestling and she just doesn't care. It means nothing to her. And I think with AEW, I do like the fact that it's an alternative. They are putting out great matches. They're putting out 5-star matches, whatever else, and they have a great high quality of wrestling content on their program, right? But there's also the people who want that and relish that. They also get very entitled to that, and sometimes those people are the worst when it comes to feedback. If you're giving them entertainment, at the end of the day, pro wrestling is entertainment, and you need that to continue to grow your audience. And you have to be very careful about catering to the people that demand 5-star matches, 5-star matches, 5-star matches, 5-star matches, banger, 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 because you can only go so far. We're human beings with human bodies. I mean, and I love having good wrestling. Don't get me wrong. I love having great wrestling on the program, but it is not the be all end all.
That was a great angle, and I think Okada's been awesome in his role. I think like It was a controversial decision to turn Okada heel and put him in that position, but I think it was absolutely the right decision. He's been great in it, and he's a linchpin to the elite right now. And Perry's going to be a big deal. And like I said, I think there's going to be some sort of takeover match where power is in balance. Wouldn't hate. Brought this up on the Fightful show. A commenter brought it up that I was on. Like, you got Double or Nothing coming up. Let Tony Khan put control of AEW on the line in some sort of a match, Double or Nothing. It makes so much sense. So if that's the route they go, or if there's a blood and guts match, or if there's a new authority figure, maybe it's Sting, maybe it's Kenny. I don't know what it's going to be. It's definitely an intriguing angle, and it's got you thinking what's going to happen next. So we'll find out, because this is a critical time for AEW. Lots of rumors right now going on about Warner Brothers Discovery and the NBA, and if that deal falls apart, what does that mean for AEW TV? So uh,
Mhm.
very important time for them to hit with some of this stuff going into the summer. So we will see what happens there.